9 FM WORT. This is DJ Ciggy here with our special guest tonight, Phillip-Micheal Scales.
How's it going?
How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm excited to talk about your tour and your upcoming album, and most notably your upcoming Madison show at the Bur Oak.
Yeah, yeah.
But we're just kind of here to hang out, and I wanted to get to know you a little better about just who you are, what you like to do, and how you feel about art and music. So, can you introduce yourself? Can you tell us a little bit about where you're from?
Yeah, for sure. I'm Phillip-Micheal Scales. I'm originally from Michigan, and then I lived in Chicago for about 12 years, something like that. And then Chicago feels like home. That's my hometown. And then yeah, lived in LA for a little bit. And then now I split my time between Nashville and Portland. I call my music dive bar soul. It's like this blend of indie rock and kind of the passion of the blues. I didn't feel like either genre really fit, so I was like, what if I straddled the middle? And so yeah, but I've been writing songs since I was 13, and I just love to create create these pieces of art that are interactive, that can change, that people listen to, and that have a miraculous power to like heal and also just like take you places. Like that's the craziest thing about music specifically for me is that it's like you can go anywhere in the world and hear something, and sometimes like that place will like imprint on you, like that album. I remember where I was when I heard that album. So I remember I was on a plane once to Bahrain. I had gotten an invitation to play out on an island off the coast of Saudi Arabia, and I was watching Inside Llewyn Davis, or the Llewyn Davis, whatever that sort of Oscar Isaac movie was. That was like where he was a folk musician, and
Okay.
that whole like Americana folky sound is now associated with like me walking around like this Middle Eastern city.
Wow, that's a really cool blend, right? And it's
Right?
about that intersection between genres and those blurred lines where you're like, no, I'm not gonna just do one. I'm gonna do both. And you can be anywhere in the world and you can transcend when you're performing or when you're attending a show. I've done both. And since I've started DJing, I mean, I just last weekend, I've only been doing this for less than a year, but I was at a party performing and I left my body, but I did great. I mean, I was watching the whole show and I was like, yes, this is it.
Yeah, you're in it.
So hey, that's so cool to hear because with these interviews, there have been a lot of multi-instrumentalists or artists that I've talked to, and they have the coolest insight on their life with their music. So thanks for sharing that. That's really cool.
Absolutely.
And Bahrain, what an invitation. That's
Right?
yeah.
So random. Yeah, I played a gig in Iowa City, and this dude Ali bought my record, and we had kept in touch on Twitter or something like that. And then my agent hit me up later and was just like, "Hey, do you know a guy named Ali Saeed?" And I was like, "Yeah, we're like Twitter buddies or whatever." And he was just like, "Well, he wants to bring you to the Middle East." I was like, "Great, let's go."
Let's go.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I have been doing a little research with music and with kind of your influences, but I really liked that I was reading about the blues in your music. So I was just gonna ask, what do you want us to know about how you feel about the blues? What do you love about it? How did it change your life?
The blues is a super interesting thing to me. I think that, like I grew up with my aunt was really close friends with BB King, and he
Wow.
called me his nephew and I called him my uncle, and that was like a really cool situation. And so I kind of learned about it, via that way. But I think that like there's sort of a elder wisdom to the blues. It's like the foundation of all the music that
Yes.
we have in the world. But at the same time, or modern music, I would say. But at the same time, it's like kind of takes a little bit of like an understanding, if that makes sense. You can't like when you're a kid, it's like, you're like, oh, cool, these changes. Oh, cool, these like, like soul and like whatever. But like the older you get, the more you realize like the depth that was in those blues songs and how cathartic of a process it actually is. And my theory on blues is actually that for black men in the South around, what, the I mean, obviously 1900s,
Yeah.
like that was their only outlet for emotion. You know, like
Period.
you're a hard dude who, works manual labor all day, and then like now you've got this sort of platform to sing your heart out. Like, like there's no place for your sadness. There's no place for your anger. There's no place for sort of your pain. And so like it kind of for these guys like all got filtered down into like their instruments or their voices and all that stuff. And I think that that's like a really cool uh it changes the way you think about it after you realize that.
Well, it does, man. It's so real. I mean, you have a voice and you have a guitar. Nobody necessarily is teaching you how to play, right? Nobody's teaching you how to sing, but you're having this exchange. Maybe a family member showed you, maybe a friend showed them. But it was one of those things where it was you and your instrument. And that is the base of music. And to think of where that took music, I mean, we're still not doing enough to debunk and demystify all of those blues artists that ran so that other artists could walk. And
For sure.
I'm always trying to do my part in researching it and reading about how it influenced musicians, but also what they choose to do with that influence. So
Sure.
I think that's really cool. I was just reading a memoir by Keith Richards called Life, and every single chapter of his book comes back to the blues. I
Sure.
always thought like, oh, the Rolling Stones, man, like this like sellout band, blah blah blah. But great, I don't know about any of the other artists. I just read what one of them said, and one of them has endless love and endless appreciation for things like the blues and for reggae and for R&B, and like goes out of his way to pay credit to that. So I thought that was actually really cool. Like I kind of
Yeah, the
demystified
Rolling
that.
Stones brought Muddy Waters over
Right.
to England. They were a lot of cats who were just like, I'm not like they were like they used their platform to get these blues artists over there, which was really cool.
I agree. I'm really into that right now. I'm almost done with the book and I highly recommend the audiobook because it sounds
Okay.
like Keith Richards is reading it and it's hilarious. So,
Nice.
well, okay. So BB King is um a musical legend, an American musical legend, and it's really really cool to hear you just talk about him as your uncle
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
because that's who he is. He's a person, and he made amazing music as well and has influenced so many people, but wanted to pay a
Definitely.
little cred to that.
For sure.
Was that when you were with your auntie, or where was your auntie at when you met him?
Um, yeah, they're based in Detroit, so their family's
Cool.
my aunt's based in Detroit, and my family's based in Detroit. So, pretty much I just always see him whenever I was in town. So if, I was in college in Boston and he was playing, like I go see him.
What's like one of your favorite spots in Detroit to see music?
Oh man, it's been so long since I've lived there. But there was a place called I think it's called the Fillmore now. It was the State Theater when I was a kid.
Okay.
Just like a historic like venue, at least sort of for me and all the bands that I was seeing coming up, a lot of the indie rock and emo rock and all that stuff. So that was a cool
Yeah.
room, and I actually got to play it a couple of years ago on the tour. So that was
No
that was pretty cool.
way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Was that kind of a special show for you at by the end of it? How did you feel about it?
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, like, I remember buying something corporate and yellow card tickets or something like that for when I was like, I don't know, like 16, 17, whatever, sitting in the balcony, with my girlfriend. And then, now I'm on stage. And so that was a really cool time for sure.
I love that full circle stuff. That's why I ask
For
about
sure.
the venues because I mean, where I'm from, I'm based here in Madison, Wisconsin. We have a lot of
Sure.
really cool little venues that a lot of people hit
Yeah.
at the beginning or the end of their tour. And for some reason, they're always just like, oh, Madison was so fun. You know,
I ended my tour in Madison I ended a tour in Madison last June, and it was a blast.
yeah, weren't you at the Orpheum?
I was,
Old
yeah.
theater. Yeah, man, that's the oldest theater that we have in the city. So yeah, I was a
Yeah.
little ticket taker there many, many years ago and worked my way up and out. And now I'm doing live music. So
Very cool.
yeah, well, thanks for answering about Detroit. It's definitely
For
a
sure.
destination for lots of folks here in Madison because it's a music city.
For
Um,
sure.
well, hey, let me ask you about your tour, the Good to Be Here tour. Your album is
Yeah.
dropping on April 25th,
Yep.
which will be 3 days after this interview. So, can you tell us a little bit about the Good to Be Here album?
Oh yeah, man. This record is probably my is easily my best record. For sure. Yeah, it was recorded in Nashville, with a producer named Dan Nobler. I really love his like ethics and the way he kind of plays with music and I don't know. We were talking a whole bunch and we were talking about genre and he's like, I don't really like care that much, and we kind of agree on that in terms of like we talked about our influences, and obviously there's going to be influences when you come in, and maybe it's like a soul-ish record or whatever, but
Right.
at the end of the day, it's like if you write great songs, they end up being clothes for uh you know the songs end up being like a great song is like a pretty person. And so it's like you can put a pretty person in a tracksuit or a
Yeah.
tuxedo or t-shirt
Yes.
and jeans and they're still going to be pretty. It's just going to be a different look, and then you got some people who kind of look only good in, jeans, So it's like the clothes are the genre and the song is the person, And so I think
Cool.
I try to write songs that fit kind of anywhere, So we got to work together. He's worked with incredible bands like Lake Street Dive,
Oh, yeah.
Allison Russell, Bahamas. So that was really fun to be able to get to, make a record with him, and it was live, which was awesome. Having a whole band in the room and having, just having that energy was probably the most thrilling, fun experience I had because we kind of walked in there not without a plan. I mean,
Of
he was the
course.
producer, so I'm sure he had a plan, but like, yeah, we just kind of felt it out in the room instead of sort of, the way a lot of people record where you're just like, all right, cool, I'm putting down this guitar part. Okay,
Yeah,
cool, we'll get
cut and
somebody to like
dry.
lay down
Time to
drums.
go home. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or even worse, where it's like, Pandemic record, which was my record beforehand. So my first record, my last record was Singer-Songwriter, last full length, and it was a Pandemic record. So we were sending each other guitar tracks and bass tracks and keys and trying to make it
Wow.
all like go together, which it was fine and it had its things, but it wasn't the same with like the people in the room.
No, it has to be a completely different experience. I went back to get my degree in graphic design during the pandemic, and
Sure.
I mean, what an incredible change going back into the classroom. It was truly so different. I was taking like assignments and submitting them online. And then like this weird thing where I was talking to my professor like you and I are talking, but this was our only option. I couldn't even
Sure.
go and see their show on
Sure.
May 13th at the Bur Oak, like your show. So,
Uh, sure.
so it
Sure.
was one of those things where it's just like this is going to be a lot different if I ever get to see them in person again. So I'm happy that we're celebrating good to be here because it is good to be here. It's good to be producing in person and having these talks.
Definitely. Yeah, that's the best part about tour, is just that you get to get in a van and go to these places and play these shows and meet these people and it's a really cool experience for sure.
I am itching to go on a tour. In fact, I'm in a DJ group and
Cool.
we are starting to do our own stuff. A lot of us do themed events and it's so fun, but I was like, why aren't we just leaving? Like we love it here and we have a lot of love in the city and we show the city a lot of love. But how fun would it be just to be our own, just go out and travel and make friends? So
Yeah,
I'm
for
gonna be
sure.
hitting
Detroit's got to be a destination for DJs.
there's got to be, and one of them is the East Coast. I'm going to be releasing a zine in a couple of months and hopefully just dropping it off to people because tour doesn't have to be this perfect plan. Sometimes you just have to go. But
Definitely.
when you do have upcoming shows with scheduled dates and important stuff like that, I want to make a little space for it. So for all of the listeners out there, if you're just tuning in, this is DJ Ciggy sitting here with Phillip-Micheal Scales. He is going to be coming to Madison in May on May 13th at the Bur Oak, which, if any of you are from here, you know that's on Winnebago Street. It's a very well loved venue. It's been around for years. So,
Heck yeah.
Dive Bar Soul is the vibe, and Phillip-Micheal Scales is out here blending genres and being an artist. And for me, like, it's really cool to hear that other artists are doing this.
Sure.
I think this is maybe the fourth interview that we've done here just for artists coming through Madison, and every single one is bringing multiple forms of art. So I'm really happy to hear that you're bringing your music, your history, and your flavor. That's really cool.
Definitely. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Dude, of course. And like, okay, here's my next question. Would you ever DJ?
Oh man. So when I had when I was started as a full-time musician, before I was a full-time artist. And the difference between a full-time musician and a full-time artist is that you get paid to play other people's stuff versus getting paid to play your own stuff.
Yeah.
And so I kind of felt like a DJ, and I'll still do those gigs sort of every now and then just to fill in the cracks in a schedule sometimes. But it's kind of cool. You'll play a party, you'll play a wedding, you'll play a cocktail hour, you'll play all these different corporate events, like whatever it is. And I don't really go in with a set list. I just have like 3, 4 hours of music that I know that are just all covers. And so it's cool to be able to read the room and see what the
Yes.
vibe is
Yeah.
and see like, okay, cool. Grandma wants to hear I'll Fly Away. And, that auntie over there wants to hear like, Al Green, and like that kid over there wants to hear Chance the Rapper so he knows I'm not washed. Like, and just being able to kind of blend all those different vibes together. So it kind of feels like a DJ. I see it as a DJ because I feel like if you go in with a strict plan, you're kind of, shooting yourself in the foot.
You're setting yourself up for not failure, but things are going to change and they're going to change quickly and you may not be prepared for that. So it's great that you just made that comparison because if you have an ear for music, you could be a DJ. You probably already are and you don't even know it. Like what I intend to do personally, not just DJ and not just be on the radio, but to produce music. I'm able to
Sure.
play drums, guitar, like I can hear that stuff, right? But it's not just about me going out and like me performing just those two instruments. I want to know how can I make my DJ controller a guitar? How can I make these sounds, right, with reverb? And it's so fun. A great example of this is Kate Renata, who is an incredible DJ. Um, there's a video of him in 2014 where he's scratching in front of like an audience and he's doing all his own music. But it's the way that he has this tiny little piece of equipment and he's making the room explode. And like
Oh, that's awesome.
that kind of impact is almost like it seems like Renaissance. Like everybody's just dancing, they're having fun, and this one guy is just making incredible music. And that kind of stuff, like anybody could be a DJ.
For
But
sure.
you
For
gotta
sure.
want it. You gotta like have that in your heart and in that drive. So that's cool.
Yeah, I think the coolest part about DJs in the beginning was like there was this need to make music, and like that was what was available to them. And so from these records that they had, there's this pioneering spirit where they're just like, okay, let me pull the beat from this, or let me blend this into this, or let me,
Right.
like it was like DJs were king back in the day,
Right.
before rappers were like, huge. It was like there was the DJ who was like the centerpiece.
Yeah, it's cool to think that they have taken on so many forms and a lot of us can do many different things with
Definitely.
music. So I'm glad that we can connect on that level. That's so cool. Um And again, if you guys are just tuning in, we're sitting here with Phillip-Micheal Scales, who is coming to Madison next month. You can catch his show at the Bur Oak on May 13th. Tickets are on sale at theburoak.com. Get them now, folks. Lock in. I mean, this is the time to do it. And we're doing this interview 3 days before the album even comes out, which by the way, DJ Ciggy did pre-save that album. So I recommend
Hey,
everybody does that wherever you stream music. And it looks like there's a physical companion book as well
yeah.
in your merch pack. So that's cool.
hmm Yeah, my partner is a photographer, and so she was with me in the studio when we were making the record, and just documenting it. And we had all these gorgeous pictures, and I was sitting there thinking, I was like, man, it would be great to have like a table book one day or something of all these like photos or like this moment. And then I was like, wait a second, why don't I just make it? And so I decided to print a little book and make a couple like write down some stories and put down some lyrics from the record. And yeah, it ended up being like this really cool little companion book, and I thought it was a cool way for somebody who, if they wanted like an extra look into the process, to check it out.
I mean, absolutely. That is another extension of your music. And, you know, we're not just putting this stuff out there just for giggles. It's like, hey, this is actually like a documented part of the process. For me, that's huge. Like, that's a huge
For
part.
sure.
I wanted to
Well,
give a
it's odd. I think music has changed a bit, or like maybe the way we consume it is different. I mean, I'm a little older, but I feel like when I was younger, I would look at these tour do blogs and diaries, and like, be like itching to see if like this band posted a tour diary or not, and like, okay, what was it like in Toronto when you played, or what was it like in Spain when you were overseas, and then you get like one photo, maybe two, and that was kind of a cool part of the process, and you'd listen to all these records, and it was like you'd see like Bright Eyes or whatever, and
yeah,
you'd kind of have like your imagination would take over because all you had was like the liner notes, you didn't really have that much of the
exactly.
visual component of it, so you were kind of like hungry for all of this information. And I think now is equally cool, but it's like interesting because like I'm sure most people know what Billie Eilish's bedroom probably looks like, whereas
Right.
like
Right.
with Prince, you were just like, I saw like half of his studio rack, and then like, like you're an engineer or producer or whatever, you like go run and see if you can find out like, okay, well he did this and then he did this and then like that kind of stuff.
Yes, exactly. I mean, there was also this mysticism attached to it because we didn't have the access to just sit there and consume, consume, consume. So I've had to do a little bit of my own life, a little bit of undoing in order to be like, hold on, let's jump back in to vinyl, cassette tapes, and CDs. Let's see what's going on with the book jacket. Let's see what's going on in the magazine articles because like there was a time where people were just waiting for that stuff and they were
For
having a
sure.
completely different experience with the music because maybe they were just getting it on the radio. And for a while, FM radio wasn't even available to people. So it
Sure.
became this thing where it was only AM and only in certain parts of the US,
Right.
which is unfortunate. You know, it really was. And it's cool now to think I mean, it's taken on such a life, really. But I agree. I think a lot of people consume it a lot differently now. It's way
Yeah, and I
more
think what you
accessible.
guys are doing is really important because I think the thing that hasn't gone away is curation. I think that it's great in some way that like when we were like now everybody has a platform, so there's a whole lot more like, fringe stuff or a whole lot more things that can find its niche, find its audience a lot quicker. But at the same time, we're also like weighed down by this barrage of stuff.
Yes.
It's just like
Yes,
all we
100%.
got is like, this like Spotify is like, what do they say, like 6,000 songs come out a day or something like that. And so it's like, how do you wade
Wow.
through that as a human being? Like your brain isn't ready for all that information. So I feel like we
Oh,
still end up going to like, what does the Spotify playlist say? Or like, what does this curator say? Or what does this blog say? So that we can at least like have an
filter
entry
it.
point. Yeah, we need a filter, really. And I think that like, I don't know. I think we're gonna have a reckoning. No, I mean nothing like
Yeah, I'm with you, man.
crazy,
I'm
but
with you. Yeah.
yeah, there's got to be a reckoning at some point in time where we're like, okay, we need a process for filtering some of this information. And,
Yes.
because it's not all, and it's interesting too. I've heard that actually there are like, there's so many people releasing like multiple songs and just like more and more and more and more and more and extended editions and all this other stuff. And then like, it's because of the platforms. Like, you used to have like a finite amount of time on an album.
Right.
And so it was like, all right, there's 45 or like 20 minutes aside, 23 minutes aside, and like that's all you can fit on the album. And then, the CD came, and so then like you got a little bit more time, and then you could do like a double CD, but now it's just like streaming, so it's just like anything goes, dude.
You
Throw
can
it
just
up.
upload it, right? There's no like the filter itself changed. So now there's
Yeah.
this endless cloud of like you can just drag and drop songs
Right. I
and
remember when
ah,
Kanye West, RIP, did that.
for real.
He released a record, shortly before he lost his mind, and like it was the first record where like he kept changing, like it got uploaded, but then like he would change parts of the record and re-upload it. So like you weren't even listening to the same piece of art, and it was like ever changing, and it was like, oh man, there's like something about like now we don't even have to put the pencil down, like that's the thing about art. What do they say? Art's never finished. It's just
Exactly.
it just has to be abandoned at a certain point in time.
Yeah, my whole world, my whole artistic personality has been built on You're not going to finish everything. And sometimes that is the beauty of it. And I would almost imagine that when he did that, he was really trying to demonstrate what that is and how easy it is to do. That guy has insane reach. And I think he really tries to push the button on like, here's what we're doing as artists. And it's not good and it's not bad, but he's showing us that it can be done. And it's just, I mean, it's kind of mind blowing and sad in a way.
Yeah,
It,
yeah. I mean, I think that there's a lot of, I don't know, it's interesting, obviously I don't agree with, very much of the things that come out of Kanye West's mouth. But like it's wild because I think that, before it was just art. And so like you talk about Keith Richards, you talk about, all these artists who put out their music, and we're at a point now where like every single like there's receipts for everything,
there's receipt.
and
Yeah,
and it's calling people to change their behaviors, which I think is great as well. But like we never had this much knowledge and access to people. There
right.
were always tabloids, but we never had like this level of stuff. And so, yeah, it's odd because it just changes the whole perception of the artist and music and how we consume and when we consume and what we're consuming. And if somebody's just in the spotlight enough, then we gravitate more towards them. But we all want to be. I don't know. I feel like we all want to be we all want to know an artist, We
Of
all want to
course.
feel like they
Yeah.
speak to us. And in these little devices that we have now make us feel a lot closer than than we did. I'll tell
Yes.
you a quick story. I
Please.
lived in a building in Chicago, and Chance the Rapper was one of the residents, and I
Oh,
was
sure.
a resident musician. And
Sweet.
so like he would just like randomly like come like drop his daughter off or like come through. Like he would just like he was always like kind of passing through, and so I'd be playing in the lobby and just be like, all right, cool, there's Chance the Rapper, no big deal. And so it was wild. But I remember following him on Instagram, and I had to stop once I lived with him because it was like he would be at like a place with like a cup. He'd be like, I don't know, at like Harold's Chicken hanging out with his friends or something. And
Right.
he'd have like a cup and I'd see it. And then he'd walk through the door like with the cup. And I would like feel that reflex to be like, oh, hey. And then I was like, he doesn't know me from a ham sandwich. Like that's so it really truly is like, when you post stories, it feels very intimate and you're creating this
Yes.
relationship. And then you have the other side of it where people meet you in person, and their expectations are a little different. Like I think Chapel Roan has been going through, she was like kind of the first person to say that, of just sort of like, hey, can I have like some
Yeah.
space in public?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's an incredible story and is really relatable because you do want that reflective experience of I just saw an artist. What if they saw me back? Would that make me feel seen? And I'm glad we brought this up because I think it's important to take it with a grain of salt that we have these platforms and this level of visibility. And we also have artists that are shown in different ways through different forms of media. But when we filter stuff out through interviews, through the live show, through buying albums, through supporting local music, like I really think like that's the ticket when you're making those real connections with people that are not just in your musical community, but they're in your city. You might be a touring artist and you might be going through a place, but you just changed somebody's life. Like that level of
Yeah.
impact is incredible. And people can just follow your music. I think that is the most important part. It's if you're ever confused or you're lost, just put the music on and it'll be okay, you know?
Yeah, and I mean it's wild to think, we get all in our heads and like, oh, I only have this thousand many followers and I wish I had tens of thousands of followers and whatever it is. And then you're just like, dog, like imagine your follower count in a room. Do you
Hello.
know what I mean?
Hello. Yes.
Like
Imagine
that's how
that.
many people you're talking to. I mean, obviously, blah, 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 reach whatever, but it's like, it's really important to take a step back and realize that, like, the fact that, like, I've made a living off of this for 10 years is incredible. The fact that,
Yes.
people are listening, the fact that people have gotten off their couches, made plans, gotten babysitters to come out and like check out my show is something like supremely humbling. And,
Yes.
it's something that I have to remind myself all the time to just be like, yo, you gotta be grateful for just that. And I think the rest comes for sure.
Hey man, I
But
think you're coming correct, really. I'm excited to see the show and hear the album.
for sure, for sure. It's gonna be a good one. It's definitely gonna be a good one.
Well, hey, one more time, if y'all are just tuning in, we're here on 89.9 FM WORT, Madison's listener-sponsored community radio station. This is DJ Ciggy with Phillip-Micheal Scales, and he's got an upcoming show in May at the Bur Oak. And you guys can catch more information on the DJ Ciggy Instagram, find out more about Philip on Instagram as well, and his website. Philip, thank you so much for meeting with me today. This
Thank
has
you so much
been
for having me.
a really nice conversation and very humbling. So
Definitely.
we will see you after the album drop and at your show at the Bur Oak.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much, Siggy. I appreciate having you.
Hey, cheers, man, and we'll talk soon.
All right.
Take
Bye
care.
bye.